Well, hello, everybody.
Hey,
Thanks for joining us once again for another Threat Thursday Live. Today, we are going to be talking about Refined Kitten, APT33, Peach Sandstorm. Pick your name, depends on the vendor you typically follow the most. But we're talking APT33. If you haven't heard of them before, they're an Iranian state sponsored kind of threat group. Their motives, methodology, all that fun stuff really aligns with the IRGC. So you're seeing a lot of stuff happening towards government, aerospace, academia, things like that. So we're going to kind of talk through some of their newest campaigns as they were documented by Microsoft mid to end of last year. What's been really interesting with this one, I'll go ahead and bring this up here so you guys can see what we kind of wrote up. We did a cool little diamond model as always, highlighting this campaign, kind of the infrastructure that was being used and capabilities, things like that. But what makes this one interesting is kind of the variation in tactics and some of their new evolutions and how they're using malware and their access from either password spraying or social media influencing, phishing, things like that, to get people to obviously open up and run their malware, their backdoors. So we'll talk through that as a big highlight here. And then obviously we'll end it with Tyler talking detections because that's how we do this thing, right? So let's kick this off. The really interesting thing about the tickler malware variant and what's going on with Peach Sandstorm during this last campaign was their use of duplicate name or file type extensions on some of these files. So they're giving you this little like zip file with an update inside of it. It's got a bunch of PDFs. It's got one PDF that was named tickler.pdf.exe. It was in fact called that. Like that wasn't us just choosing a funny name for it. Like that's what it's documented as in the reporting, which was basically a custom built executable that took advantage of some of the like typical behaviors because most users aren't going to recognize the duplicate extension in the first place. They'll scroll past it real fast. But if they've also got like hide file type extensions on by default, which usually is most of the time in Explorer, they would never see the true extension and just think this is a PDF file and run it. What's cool about it is once this custom built executable kicks off, it loads a couple of these benign PDF files up that were served with the zip file, opens one in front of your face. So you're like, oh, cool. Yeah, there is some kind of like actual content here. As you're reading through it, a bunch of its other backdoor stuff is happening behind the scenes. It's doing like a quick little initial recon. It's going to dig through, your screenshots, things like that. And then it's going to load what they've dubbed sold.dll. This is one of their kind of multi-stage backdoors that's going to help set persistence. It's going to load some batch scripts, make some registry changes, all kinds of really cool stuff all together. I liked watching this one kind of come together and play out because they've blended a lot of their old TTPs and behaviors with some new evolutions to the way they're using this malware. Notably, some of the old stuff they're still seeing happen nowadays is like their use from Lasagna, their use of AD Explorer. They're using an RMM tool as always. They like to install one. So in this threat, we included AnyDesk for some quick telemetry as well. And we also try to mimic what they did with AD Explorer and with Lasagna. We brought all of that kind of together for you guys as a quick little demonstration of what could happen here. So they do their, let me scroll up, they do their initial recon. We mimic that, just doing some quick calls on get sim instance, doing keyloggers, print screens, gathering clipboard data, sysinfo. That moves into the actual execution further of sold.dll and the other batch scripts, things like that. Once those happen, that's setting our persistence. It's going to add a new registry key in here. As you can see under current version run, they called it SharePoint. And that in our threat is just there for like an indicator of the state change. You could easily, if you wanted to reuse this, add in another payload instead of just calling it something and have it truly do persistence for you. From there, they dive into their round 2 of recon using Lasagna. They're going to gather up a bunch of info, exfil it over C2, and then they're going to do the AD Explorer stuff, the AnyDesk stuff, and that kind of rounds out this whole actual campaign from them. What's notable about this, besides their use of the DLL to run a batch script, to write a registry key, and do all these other things, was that actual use of some basic simple living off the land behaviors as well, like net, them using either the RMM tools you have in place or bringing in their own, and all of their typical reconnaissance. Like none of that tradecraft has changed in years from what we've seen between the updates on these threat campaigns. And it really mimics a lot of what all the other major threat actors are doing. They're using what's in the environment. They're not wasting time, effort, and money creating all kinds of crazy implants and payloads and things like that just to do basic recon or set persistence or stuff, because you already have the capabilities here. But that's kind of the long story short on the threat and what's going on here. It was really interesting to build out and write. We've emulated those multi file name extension executable and the DLL for you to actually use and see what that telemetry looks like. We didn't load in a copy of theirs from VirusTotal or something. We rebuilt it from scratch so it's safe. It's not going to go do anything crazy, and you guys can utilize it in your environment to see what that telemetry looks like. So with all of that said, let's get to the stuff you guys really care about. I know you're not big on knowing who the threat actor is. The insight's nice, but you want the what's in it for you, right? You want to see what Tyler's got cooking for detections. Let me stop sharing.
Man, I think that's the quickest we've gone over the threat actors.
Well, this one was quick and simple. It's a lot of old being reused, and Tickler and Sold is really the highlight here. So
yeah, for sure. All right, well, and over to detection. So we have typically in the detections, I'll clean up all of the false positives just to kind of make it look a little bit cleaner. In this one, we didn't. I thought maybe we would change it up a little bit and leave some of the false positives in there. So that's what we see. Let me just get my screen set up right. Here we go. What we see up top here. So the first thing that we're looking for is some suspicious archive creation. You know, some zip files, some precursors to maybe exfiltration, or in this instance, the tickler pdf.exe, as well as all the accoutrement that were inside of it is stored in this peaches.zip file, which is then expanded later on to then execute the double extension PDF to perform that like SharePoint persistence mechanism and things like that. And we have the results.zip that we have here as well, which comes from either running AD Explorer or running Lasagna. I don't remember which one it is, but yeah, just looking for some archive creations. That's not really a typical thing you see in a ton of environments from like users doing. That's normally more for applications that are running or doing things like that. And we can see, a point that we always bring up is looking at the image or the process or the parent process of who is, or not who, of what is making these archives, right? And we talk to this every Threat Thursday, and I'll bring it up multiple times, even today. But stuff running out of desktop executables, out of desktop downloads, temp, public, anything that's not program files, system32, or embedded somewhere else, maybe under like C Windows, that should really kind of rise to the top and give you some, some fuel to really hunt on that. Like I said, we left the false positives in here as well. I think that this first one is a really kind of great example of how normal things that happen in the environment can look bad, right? We have we have Edge that's running an Edge update. It's got some random GUID in there, or unique identifier. It's got some 7-zip files. It's got updater.packed. Like, to me, this stuff seems pretty weird, especially this updater and updater.packed 7-zip file it has there on the bottom. It's not weird. It is completely a part of Edge. The reason why we see this on in this thread, in these detections, is because the default PDF opener is Edge. So when we ran this in our lab, it opened Edge. We haven't ran Edge in a long time because it's our lab environment. So when it did that, it automatically kicked off and the updater install, right? The silent updater install that happens when you open Edge. That's why we have these additional kind of hits over here, which I think look malicious. I don't know if you, or at least anomalous, right? This is something that if I saw these things happening, I didn't see it all the time, it would definitely be something I would want to investigate more. But it is, completely innocuous. With that, it's not to say, actually, let me talk about this a little more. With that, it's not to say like this is inside of program files, Microsoft Edge updates. You could also place your files under these directories. So by excluding these, which we always kind of talk about again, of these uncommon directories where you don't expect things to happen, you could still place executables and malware and have a malicious intent inside of these program files. So you don't want to completely ignore them, but the ones that exist outside of here is definitely something you want to probably pay a little more attention to. Next up on there, again, non-standard directories, looking at that remote access software or remote management tools, RMM, RAS, depending on, I guess, kind of how you use it. So in this one, we're looking for a bunch of different type of remote access software. This one, we utilize AnyDesk for the threat, but in this query, we're looking, for product name, image name, and command line arguments that contain AnyDesk, TeamViewer, any of the other kind of remote access software you would expect to see. And like Trey had said, in addition to using like living off the land binaries and things like that, remote access software, I don't want to say is living off the land, but it's pretty close. I mean, a ton of organizations that we work with utilize these remote access software for, administrative access or updates or, TeamViewer, different things like that. While it's not inherently installed on the system, we see it installed or used in most organizations. So you really want to make sure that only the RAS software that you have installed is running and kind of keep a monitor on where that's reaching out to. If you see that leaving your enterprise or coming from an outside source, not in your internal subnets, that's something that you want to be aware of. The next one up is just some LOLBAS discovery, some living off the land binaries and scripts. Again, we left all of the false positives in here to show that, detections are more, not everything is going to be 100% this is bad all the time. Things are going to look anomalous and look kind of malicious. So again, we have these Edge updates, the Google updater, all the same thing from starting Chrome and Edge for the first time, and it going through and doing its updates and things like that. I pulled up this query to kind of show why these were hitting on what they were hitting on. So for our LOLBAS discovery, we just have a bunch of different kind of LOLBAS discovery commands we would expect to see, right? Who am I, VSS admin, Q user, system info, etc. So with this, what most of these are hitting on is the set that we have right here. So we have asterisks on either side. We could probably improve these with either a hyphen for like a commandlet or putting a space in between it or something like that, or having both the hyphen one and then also having a space one in there. That would remove some of these. So like the ones that say set over here. So like in the setup, that's what all of these are hitting on, is from the setup in the command line. So wanted to show this as an example of like you need to continually kind of monitor your detections and monitor what you're getting back and kind of continually tune it so you don't get these false positives later on. You have more fidelity in your query and you're not just getting blown up because I put asterisks on either side of a word like set and now I'm getting hits on all kinds of things, right? This is also a good use of, again, looking at non-standard directories. The ones up here up top for Edge, all of those are inside of program files. So if I modified this query to have it filter out all of the parent images inside of program files, that would drop all of those. But again, it's all kind of based on your risk of what you deem acceptable and what you're kind of looking for. Again, your risk and your threat appetite. And then down here at the bottom, we can see some pretty anomalous malicious commands being ran. Again, we see TT for Thursday being ran from the desktop directory, which is then calling CMD, net, who am I, calls PowerShell and some other instances. You can see some of the command line arguments that are being utilized over here. So definitely something to be cognizant about. This one especially, because to mount a drive via net, you have to have the username and password and put it in there in clear text. So now we know that the adversary knows what the password is to at least his a admin account, which is bad, right? Definitely, you would probably use that as another pivot point to look at what has happened around this user. Has there been any LSAS images being accessed by something else? Roll this password, different things like that. But just seeing this command line argument be like this user's password is available in clear text now. So be aware of for that, for the low bass discovery. Scroll down, I said lots of false positives in here. Edge and Chrome run a lot of different command line arguments, and it can definitely look like it is malicious. So some more AnyDesk execution. So up top, we talked about just remote access software in general. Now we're targeting just the AnyDesk execution itself. So for AnyDesk execution, while the results look the same, the query is different. So this is looking for the process creation of AnyDesk that's running. So this is, again, looking at the product. This is looking at hashes. This is looking at the author name. This is looking at the image, all the kind of the metadata that's inside of AnyDesk. We're looking for all of those. So even if you were to just do something simple like rename anydesk.exe to anywhere.exe or something like that, this query would still hit because it's looking at other metadata fields. Those can be modified and adjusted to then hide those, and there's some other detections that you can go to find for that. But
it comes down to level of effort there too, like how deep into the weeds are they going to get on evasion and all these other things.
Yes, 100%. We have one, I don't think we have it in this detection, but we have another one that looks for when an AnyDesk network connection is stood up, because essentially stands up an out of bounds, or an out of band, excuse me, an out of band network connection to run just over like the AnyDesk network. That, to change that, you have to completely change the program. And if you're going to completely change the program, they're probably just going to make their own, right? or use something else. So that network detection is also a really good one. I don't think we have it on this dashboard, but that's another good one that we've talked about before as well. And then next up, again, now we're looking. These two queries are very similar. The only real difference between these is the directory that we're looking in, right? So this one up top is for AnyDesk execution. We're down here, it's for AnyDesk execution outside of program files, outside of System32, outside of C Windows, places like that. So if it's in a non-standard directory where it's not typically installed, you want to know about that. And then again, suspicious process creation location, looking outside of those standard directories. See, we got some false positives up here because it's running this update.exe. That's something that we have built into the detection. Update or updater.exe, things like that are very common for adversaries to use or rename because so many applications just have an update.exe or updater.exe, me update, different things like that. You see some of the false positives up there, again, just from Edge opening for the first time in a long time. But then outside of that, we can quickly see how what else the adversary is doing. So we see this TT APT33 running that tickler PDF exe, running AZ Explorer, running lasagna, command prompt, making some registry changes, all kinds of stuff like this. And it's even kind of coupled. So this is looking for any process creation that is outside of standard directories, right? The next one that we have is looking for PowerShell or command prompt process creation that's outside of those standard directories. So it kind of trims down all of this kind of fat that we have up there to looking at just what is happening from a command prompt or from a PowerShell perspective. But you notice there's some things that you miss out of this, right? So you don't see MS Edge starting to open this PDF, right? Because that's not started by PowerShell or CMD, it's started by Edge. You don't see, I don't think you see the SharePoint. So you see SharePoint.bat that's running, but you don't see that it's like what it's being written to, what it's doing after that. You don't see the AnyDesk running and different things like that. So again, the point kind of having the multiple different versions of these is that one detection, one query isn't going to find everything. And while sometimes these queries can maybe seem a little redundant, you can see right here what the difference is when you kind of look at a broader scale as when you kind of focus in on it. We'll say on the other side, the real benefit of just looking for the command prompt or PowerShell is probably every adversary runs command prompt or PowerShell at some point in an engagement. At least all the reporting in CTI that we read, they're using it, right? So if you can tee off on one thing, like maybe this net use or even a directory listing, that's not really typical for users to do that. I mean, I do it, but for like normal users, that's not a thing that you commonly see. So you could be like, okay, someone is doing a directory listing on their documents or this net use, and it's coming from this very strange image or parent image, now you can pivot your investigation to just kind of looking at what else does this parent image do, and then you could take it from there, which would ultimately lead you to discover all of this other information. And then, man, we got a lot for these.
Yeah,
you really put a lot into this thread, huh? Some of the next ones, we only have a few more. Looking specifically for lasagna execution, like the warrior poet Lil Wayne said, real G's move in silence like lasagna. So does APT33. So in here, we're again looking for image name, product, just those different metadata identifiers that, while you can change them, a lot of times adversaries don't, because I don't want to call them lazy, but they have other jobs, they have other stuff to do, they have engagements that they're prepping for and planning for, and if it works, there's no need to change it, right? So yeah, just looking for the metadata. The same on AD Explorer, looking for this pretty robust detection that we have that's again looking for all the metadata of AD Explorer as well as common command line arguments that they're utilizing. So like having an exe that's also grabbing a .dat, looking for accept EULA, accepting that end user license agreement is also a pretty good detection to have. For example, when you run psexec for the first time, or you install a service, install some software, maybe you install an MSI of some sort, you will likely have to accept the EULA if you're installing it via the command line arguments. So you could probably make that into a pretty decent detection as well, and maybe just filter out like common administrators that do it all the time, or just have like a count of it or something like that, to be able to see if new things are being installed and being installed via the command line, or being installed from outside of those standard locations, right? Again, the standard locations, I know I've said it like 100 times, and I do it every time that we talk about this, but it's really a great place to start. I mean, unless you are an admin or system right out of the box, you're not going to have access to these more kind of hidden directories or standard directories. I shouldn't have said hidden, to the more standard directories like program files or system 32, because those are reserved for administrators. So on that initial execution, a lot of times it's in public, it's in temp, it's in local app data, it's in places like that where everyone can write to it. And by monitoring what is being executed outside of those directories, can really kind of tip you off to what's happening. You only need to find one thing, and then you could base everything else, not everything else, but you can base your hypothesis off of that one thing that you found. And then down that suspicious double extension, this is just looking for two extensions, right? Just using regex to look for something dot something dot something. Really, especially if you're looking for a .exe, a .bat, .sh, .py, different things like that as the final extension, that can even kind of narrow down what you return. But when you get super close into what you're monitoring, you have a very tight detection looking for very specific things. It's also easy to evade, right? So maybe be a little hesitant on making it only be something.exe, but it all depends on kind of what you get back in that initial execution, or excuse me, in that initial query. File extension, and then kind of an add-on to the suspicious double extension. This is looking for that file being created. This one is looking for processes being created that originate from as the image or the parent image with that double file extension. So here we see tickler.pdf executes. This is a command line argument, and then that launches Edge. Edge launches this document, which is right here, which is our fake document, which is to make it think that the you're supposed to click on it. It opens this PDF that you think is good, and then all the other stuff happens in the background. Then you could see too that, so it opens that's kind of like the carrots over here, and then it runs particular PDF exe, which launches syswow64 command prompt, which then runs the SharePoint.bat. This use right here is another pretty good indicator, or excuse me, another kind of, I don't want to say defense evasion, but changing it up a little bit, right? Because you normally see Windows System 32 cmd.exe. So by, again, changing the directories, or even if they could have taken cmd and copied it to the desktop, copied it to anywhere, right? So yeah, seeing it run kind of from a strange location that's not System 32, again, something to probably check out. And then I think the last one is just registry values being set. Here, I thought we had a detection that showed exactly what the SharePoint.bat did, but we could probably kind of trace it going back. But here we could see that inside of the run key, which you should always monitor, right? That's like day one in offensive class. You should always monitor what's going on in your run and your run once keys. We see that SharePoint.exe was created in here. It's a little obvious from the SharePoint.bat to SharePoint.exe that that's where it originated from, but you could kind of backfill what had happened in a timeline view. You could see what time this registry key was written, see what activities or what command line arguments occurred maybe 10 seconds before that happened, and then you would probably be able to piece together kind of where the SharePoint.exe was originated from. But as far as detections are concerned, that is all that I had. We really had a lot in there. There's a lot more than I remember doing.
Yeah, this one was long, and there's a couple of different holdouts here. One of the interesting things in some of their new TTPs we're seeing from APT33 was how they were doing C2 comms. They're utilizing that password spray or like their compromise of an organization. Once they've done that, they're deploying their malware, their backdoors, but they're also using those new credentials and things that they have to register new fraudulent Azure tenants, using those tenants to sign up basically for like student subscriptions to gain access to being able to run virtual machines, apps, and services all through that fraudulent subscription. Once they have that stuff in place, they're basically sending their C2 through those fraudulent subscriptions to Tickler and back into the organizations and continuing their process. So that was a really interesting use case that's been seen with them now. Outside of that, that is what we've got for you guys today on APT33 or Peach Sandstorm, or pick another name. It's a really cool threat all in all. There's a lot going on here, and hopefully you guys learned something new today you could take back to your own environments. I think we will catch you guys again here soon. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, everybody.